I was undercover as a waiter at a classified defense summit. My hand, in its crisp white glove, held the champagne flute perfectly steady. But my eyes were methodically scanning every face, every shadow. General Mason was at the head table, finalizing a $2 billion arms deal, until I caught something no one else saw. It was a faint, unauthorized RF pulse from the foreign attaché's briefcase, a whisper in my hidden earpiece, a signal that wasn't supposed to exist. My pulse spiked. I didn't flinch, didn't break my cover, I just shifted my weight. A subtle movement, catching the general's eye across the opulent ballroom. I gave the discreet signal, a simple, twofold tap on my left collarbone. The general stopped mid-sentence. His face, hard as granite, processed the signal in an instant. He raised his hand, silencing the entire room. Seal the room. Now, that moment of absolute authority. It felt a million miles away just 3 weeks earlier. I was at a crowded, suffocatingly loud retirement party for one of my father's old friends, trying my best to slip out unnoticed. But he spotted me, and he waved me over. My father, Robert Jensen, is a retired Army colonel who is pathologically obsessed with his own warrior legacy. In his world, if it doesn't involve camouflage and a rifle, it isn't real service. In his eyes, my quiet, classified work in the Navy isn't just a disappointment. It's a failure. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder, physically pulling me into his conversation. And this is my daughter, Sarah, he announced to another retired officer, his voice dripping with that familiar, false pride. She's in the Navy, handles logistics, payroll, something like that. I froze. A cold dread washed over me. The man he was speaking to wasn't just some old friend from his regiment. It was James Price, a high-level civilian advisor on the DoD review board. This was the man who, in less than a month, would be reviewing the operational security plan he personally wrote for the upcoming defense summit. Price turned to me with a condescending, dismissive smile, looking me up and down as if I were a child. Logistics, eh? Well, every army needs its bean counters. My face felt hot, but I kept my expression perfectly neutral. This was the same smile he'd probably given me when I graduated the academy. The same one my father used when I tried to explain my specialization. It was the smile of dismissal, the one that said, "Run along." Before I could even formulate a polite, non-classified correction, my father clapped Price on the back, roaring with laughter. Exactly. She's my clipboard commander. Not exactly tip of the spear like we were, Jim, but she tries. He chuckled, thinking it was just another joke at my expense. Another tally mark on a very, very long list of public dismissals. He had no idea he'd just belittled me in front of the one man who had to read and approve my classified mission reports. He had no idea what he'd just done. To understand the reckoning that followed, you have to understand the two lives I was living. That clipboard commander nickname. It wasn't new. My father had been honing that particular blade for years. I remember standing on the parade deck at my Naval Academy graduation, the gold ensign bars feeling heavy on my collar. He came up, shook my hand, not a hug, a handshake, and looked me over. I waited for, "I'm proud of you." Instead, I got, "Well, it's not West Point, but at least the uniform looks smart." That one comment sliced right through the pride of the day, leaving that familiar, cold numbness. It was the story of my life. He saw the uniform, but he refused to see the officer wearing it. The nickname became his favorite party trick. At Thanksgiving last year, my uncle, who actually ISA in logistics, asked me what I specialized in. I made the mistake of trying to answer honestly. I started to explain, in the most unclassified terms possible, the basic concepts of signals intelligence and how we track threats. I wasn't even 2 sentences in before my father let out a booming laugh and cut me off. "Sarah, please," he said, waving his hand. No one wants to hear about your spreadsheets. Tell us about that time And he launched into some 20-year-old story about his time in Germany. I just stopped. I closed my mouth, took a sip of water, and felt my entire career, my entire life, just get erased from the table. I was just the set dressing for his stories. My father saw a clipboard commander, the world he didn't see. The one I lived in every single day was starkly different. My name isn't logistics or payroll. My name is Lieutenant Sarah Jensen. My call sign is Scribe. I'm a signals analyst and counter-surveillance specialist for the Office of Naval Intelligence. My clearance is TS, top secret, sensitive compartmented information. I don't work with spreadsheets. I work inside a skiff, a silent, windowless lead, lined room where our phones don't go and the air itself feels classified. My boring desk job involves tracking the whispers and shadows that prevent wars from starting. In my father's world, men like him give orders. In my world, men far more powerful than him listen. My primary liaison is General Mason, a grizzled, no-nonsense Marine strategist who has seen everything twice and trusts his gut. And my data. He doesn't care about my last name or my gender. He cares about my analysis. I was in his briefing room just before the summit, standing in front of him, and a team of tip-of-the-spear operators. The kind of men my father idolizes. I pointed to the schematic. General, the attaché's comms package is non-standard. I said, my voice steady. The signal bleed is all wrong. We're flagging it as a potential Trojan interceptor, designed to beacon its location or record audio. My recommendation is a blue-on-blue observation post. I go in as part of the catering staff. They'll be looking for uniforms, not wait staff. The operators looked skeptical. A waiter? But Mason didn't hesitate. He looked at me, then at his team. You heard Scribe. Her analysis has never been wrong. She's our only set of eyes inside that ballroom. Her word is gospel. You move on her signal, and not a second before. The team leader just nodded, his face set. Yes, ma'am. That ma'am was quiet, but it landed with more force than all my father's yelling. At my father's house, I'm the person he tells to go fetch the coats for the guests. In the skiff, I'm the person who gives the final go signal for a covert operation that saves lives. 2 worlds, 2 identities, separated by a wall of willful ignorance. For years I had tried to speak their emotional language, but they only respected one thing: rank and public power. After my father's joke almost compromised my cover, I decided I would finally speak to them in the only language they understood. After that party, something inside me clicked into place. It wasn't just the familiar sting of being dismissed. It was James Price. My father's proud ignorance had just painted me as an incompetent bean, counter to a man who signed off on my operational security plans. This wasn't just a family insult. It was a security risk. My father's ego had created a professional blind spot. I knew then I couldn't fix this with an emotional argument. He didn't speak that language. This wouldn't be revenge. It would be a procedural correction. I knew Operation Blind Scepter was coming. I knew my role, and I knew what follows success in my world. Formal, irrefutable recognition. The military runs on protocol. An awards ceremony isn't a chaotic family dinner where the loudest voice wins. It's a place where rank is absolute, and a citation is a fact, read into the public record. This was the system Kia lived in. The system my father acclaimed to worship. I would use it. I went to my terminal, not in anger, but with a cold precision. It felt like plotting coordinates. I pulled up the official guest nomination form for the upcoming naval base change of command and awards ceremony. It was all very standard. I typed in the 2 names. Carefully, deliberately, under the distinguished guest section. Guest 1. Colonel Rhett Robert Jensen. Guest 2, Mr. James Price. I submitted the request, and flagged it for General Mason's front office. His aide, Warrant Officer Davis, a sharp, quiet man who'd seen my work and missed nothing, called me almost immediately. His voice was dry. "Lieutenant, I have your guest nomination form." A long pause. "The Colonel? Your father? And Price? From the Dead board?" He let the question hang in the air. "That's a bold play, Scribe." He knew exactly who they were. I kept my voice perfectly flat, perfectly professional. "My father is very interested in military tradition, Warrant Officer. I wouldn't want him to miss it." Davis was silent for another beat. Then a small, sharp exhale, the closest he ever got to a laugh. "Consider it done, Lieutenant. The protocol office will send the embossed invitations. They'll be seated in the very important person section. Front row." The invitations were sent. My father called, his voice booming with condescending pride. "An awards ceremony. Finally got your old man a seat at the big table, huh? About time." He had no idea he wasn't invited as a guest. He was being summoned as a witness. The day of the ceremony was bright, painfully clear. The air was filled with the sound of a full military band, the sharp snap of flags, and the rhythmic stamp of boots on the parade ground. It was the very picture of the military pomp and circumstance my father worshipped. I found my seat among my fellow officers, and just as Warrant Officer Davis had promised, I saw them. Front row, VIP section. My father, Robert Jensen, and James Price. They looked comfortable, smug. My father leaned over to Price, his posture exuding an unearned importance, as if Ihik were the one being honored. He was holding court. I was too far away to hear, but I knew that laugh. I could practically read his lips as he whispered something to Price. I'm sure it was something witty, something diminishing. Probably getting an award for most valuable paperclip, I thought. A familiar, cold ache settled in my stomach. He was here, in my world, and he was still telling the same old jokes. I closed my eyes for just a second, and I wasn't on the parade ground. I was back in that opulent ballroom, my hand steady on the champagne tray. I saw the attaché's briefcase again, the one that didn't match the manifest. I heard the faint, illicit pulse in my ear. My pulse spiked. I remembered tapping my collarbone, the silent signal. Seal the room. Now. The memory played out in crystal clarity. The crash of the doors, the shouts, the sudden sharp fear in the attaché's eyes. I remembered the surge of silent, armed Marines flooding the room. I remembered walking calmly, through the chaos, right up to the attaché as he was being subdued. I pointed. His left briefcase. It's a burst transmitter. He's been live streaming the entire negotiation to an off-site server. The room just stopped. The look of utter betrayal on General Mason's face as he realized how close they'd come. It was something I'd never forget. The attaché was dragged out, his diplomatic immunity instantly voided by an act of espionage. General Mason had turned to me, his face grim, while I just stood there, still holding the tray. He nodded, a single, sharp gesture. "Good catch, Lieutenant." My eyes snapped open. General Mason was at the podium. A hush fell over the entire base. When he spoke, his voice was like gravel, carrying over the loudspeakers with an authority that needed no amplification. "We are taught as warriors that the greatest threats are the ones we see," he began. "The ones on the horizon. The ones we can aim a rifle at." He paused, his gaze sweeping the crowd, and I felt him find me. "But the most dangerous threats, the ones that can truly cripple us, are the ones we don't see. The ones that are already inside the wire." I watched my father. He was listening intently now, leaning forward, his face a mask of patriotic seriousness. He loved this stuff. This was real warrior talk. 6 weeks ago, Mason continued, a $2.1 billion strategic, arms deal, a deal vital to the stability of an entire region, was compromised. A murmur went through the crowd. This was not public knowledge. An unauthorized signal was detected inside a classified summit. Our entire multi-million-dollar counter-surveillance suite, our teams of specialists, all of them missed it. It was identified by a single officer, operating under deep cover, and with zero support. My father was nodding, impressed. I saw him glance around, looking, trying to spot which operator, which tip of the spear hero Mason was talking about. General Mason's voice grew colder, harder. This one officer, with their sharp observation, single-handedly prevented a catastrophic intelligence failure, an act of espionage that would have destabilized a key region and cost this nation its credibility for decades. For this act of extraordinary merit and service, the Navy Distinguished Service Medal is awarded to. I felt the world slow down. My father's face was lit up with pride, ready to applaud the hero. Lieutenant Sarah, Scribe, Jensen. There was a sound, or rather a lack of one. A pocket of absolute, stunned silence from the VIP row. I stood up. My dress whites felt crisp, my footsteps impossibly loud on the pavement as I walked from the ranks. I kept my eyes fixed on the podium, on General Mason. But, from the corner of my vision, I saw it. I saw my father's smile not just fade, but it froze, cracked, and then evaporated, as if it had never been. His face drained of all color. He looked, utterly bewildered, at James Price. But Price was already on his feet. Price was pale, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified recognition. He knew exactly who I was. He was applauding, not out of courtesy, but out of what looked like genuine fear. I reached the stage. I saluted General Mason. He saluted back. As he took the heavy medal and its blue ribbon, he stepped forward to pin it on my chest. He leaned in, and his voice was low, but the microphone picked up every single, devastating word. Your father looks surprised, Lieutenant. I didn't turn. I didn't have to. Perhaps he, of all people, should know that the quietest soldier often carries the heaviest weapon. And then came the final, beautiful, terrible moment. Protocol. As a retired colonel, my father had to stand. He had to stand for a superior officer, a 4-star general, and he had to stand to honor a recipient of the Distinguished Service Medal. Slowly, mechanically, like a puppet whose strings had been cut and then reattached, he got to his feet. He was forced to stand at attention, in public, for a May. My father had spent my entire life teaching me the importance of rank and recognition. In the end, it only took one medal, presented by a 4-star general, for him to finally learn who I was. The reception that followed was a blur. It was held in the base's old officers' club, a place of dark wood and polished brass, a place I'd only ever been to for my father's retirement functions, always feeling like an accessory. But this time was different. The air was different. I was no longer an appendage, a footnote. I was the center. Senior officers, captains, admirals, people whose names I knew only from routing slips and intelligence summaries, came up to me. They didn't just shake my hand. They shook my hand, a firm, two-handed grip. They looked me in the eye. Lieutenant Jensen, one admiral said, his eyes sharp and appraising. That was remarkable. Scribe, wasn't it? He actually used my call sign. I've been reading your briefs for a year. It's good to finally put a face to the call sign. That one word, scribe, spoken with such casual, earned respect, felt heavier and more real than the medal on my chest. This was a respect my father, with all his bluster, could never command and could never bestow. It was earned in the quiet dark of the skiff, not at a loud party. I saw them, of course. My father and James Price. They were standing near the entrance, Two ghosts at a feast. No one was talking to them. In this room, surrounded by actual rank and proven competence, they had no currency. They had become the invisible ones. Price looked pale, humiliated, clearly just wanting to leave. My father, he just looked lost. He was in his element, the military world he loved, but it had turned on him. He was a colonel, but in that room, he was just Sarah's father, a man who had been publicly icily corrected by a 4-star general. He finally broke away from Price and started walking toward me. His steps were hesitant, all his parade ground bluster gone. He looked small. He got to within a few feet of me, just as a captain was congratulating me on the analysis. He waited, shifting his weight, his hands clasped behind his back, a posture I'd never seen him use. The captain moved on. It was just us. Sarah? He started. His voice was rough, unfamiliar. What would he have said? That he was sorry? That he was proud? I never found out. A hand landed on my shoulder, firm and protective. It was General Mason. "Excuse us, Colonel," Mason said, his voice polite but with a core of absolute steel. He didn't wait for a reply. He didn't acknowledge my father's stammering, "Secretary of the Navy wants a word with Emmy officer." He emphasized my, and gently but irresistibly steered me away, propelling me toward an even more high-ranking circle of people who were smiling, waiting for me. I glanced back. Just for a second. My father was still standing there, his hand half raised completely, alone, a statue of a man left behind in the middle of a crowded room. 6 months later, the world had shifted. The echo of that ceremony, of Mason's validation, had propelled me forward. I wasn't just scribe in a skiff anymore. I walked into my own office, an office with a window, a rare and precious commodity in the intelligence world. The plaque on the door was simple, but it felt like a novel. Section Chief, OI, Strategic Analysis. I had my own team, and what a team they were. Young, brilliant analysts. Some were civilian, some were military, and not a single one of them cared who my father was. They cared about my analysis. They cared about my leadership. When I ran a briefing, no one interrupted me. When I asked a question, I got data, not condescension. We would argue, we would debate, we'd tear each other's theories apart, all in the pursuit of the right answer. It was loud, it was collaborative, and it was the healthiest professional family I had ever known. I thought about all those Thanksgiving dinners, all the times I'd been told to pipe down or stop with the spreadsheets. Now, I stood in a state-of-the-art command center. My spreadsheets were on a massive, wall-sized big board map of the world, tracking global threats in real time. My voice was the one that mattered here. This was my table. And at this table everyone had a seat, and everyone's voice was heard. It was a Tuesday. I was deep in an analysis of shipping lane vulnerabilities when a new email popped up on my terminal. The sender name made me pause. It wasn't Dad. It was Robert Jensen. My pulse didn't spike this time. It just gave a single, heavy, pensive beat. The subject line was just one word. "Lieutenant." I clicked on it. I felt curious, detached, the way you'd look at an artifact from a different, ancient life. The body of the email was short, just a few lines. I was wrong. About your service, about everything. I would be honored if you would join me for dinner. As my guest. I read it twice. As my guest. Not as his daughter, the add-on, the clipboard commander. As his guest, an equal. He was using the only language of respect he understood. A year ago, this email would have been everything. It would have been the validation I had spent my entire life starving for. I would have cried. I would have called him immediately, the dam of years of resentment breaking. But sitting there in my office, with the hum of my team's work right outside my door, I felt a profound, quiet, and total calm. The victory wasn't this email. The victory was that this email, it didn't matter. My peace was no longer dependent on his apology. My worth was no longer in his hands. It was in my office, on that plaque, and in the respect of my peers. He'd finally seen me, but the truth was, I'd finally stopped looking at him. I took a breath. I typed a simple reply. Thank you. I'll check my schedule. I hit send. I didn't agonize over it. I didn't reread it. I archived his message. I turned in my chair, back to the big board map that glowed on my wall. I buzzed my team on the intercom. All right, people, I said, my voice clear and steady. Let's get back to it. We have a world to watch. My father believed a legacy was something you inherit. I learned a true legacy is something you build in silence and have acknowledged in public. If you've ever had to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it, share your story below. In this community, your expertise is always recognized.